Oh, what about that growing article output? Did we, what was that one?
That was
Yeah. Okay. We want to, okay, so this one, here, let me get that. So Patrick, who was up here earlier, was talking about, he and I have had a bit of conflict over growing article output against growing quality, which I don't think is all that unusual. And he said in his head why he finally came to terms with accepting what that we weren't going to decrease the number of articles that we publish, but that was not. That was news to me, his reasoning for doing that, which I don't think is probably all that unusual when you hear things from your editors either. So it's just like everybody else here in the room. We sell, even in Europe, that we sell our collections to librarians. It's no different than what we do here in the U.S. And we sell according to how large the journals are. We have a certain number of journals, a certain number of articles that we're promising those librarians, and we have to keep that up. That's something I'll need to clarify with Patrick at some point. It has been everybody, I know everybody here has had the editor say we can increase our impact factor if we decrease the articles that we publish. And that, in my experience, personal experience, that hasn't always happened either. When articles are decreased, doesn't necessarily correlate with an increase in the impact factor. Anybody else want to talk about how now with Patrick, the way that we dealt with it was we basically divided the journal, and half of the journal now is special issues and half of the journal is general issues, and we have a special issue editor in the UK that deals with all the special issues, and then Patrick deals with the general issue articles. So that satisfied him, and it kept our journal at the article count that we needed it to be at. What he doesn't know is I got pressure again from higher up in the company. That change was made for 2018. The article count increased for 2017, 2018, I was able to keep it at the same. And 2019, I was able to keep it at the same, but got a lot of pushback from my bosses that it needed to increase again. And, so that was an internal argument Patrick knows nothing about. And so the following year, I'm sure we're going to be having this conflict again with article growth against quality. So anybody else want to add any of their experiences?
Hi, I'm Laura Getz. I'm with the Journal of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. We've gone through an association reorganization this past year, and then an expanded relationship with a commercial publisher, and so my work life is changing dramatically, and this is one of the biggest ones. We're being pushed to publish more pages every year, but who holds the line on quality? I'm curious to know what other publishers do. Are you really relying on your peer reviewers, associate editors, and editor-in-chief to make sure that not only is the topic appropriate and isn't duplicative of something that was just published, but that actual sentences make sense? Because we're seeing the copy editing moving from us to, I think, somebody in India who's not familiar with the content. So what are we talking about really when we talk about quality, and who is holding the line in your various processes?
Yeah, that's a good question. There we go.
So just to respond to that, in the editorial board calls I have regularly, they really push quality over quantity. They don't care how many papers they get. They want good papers. And we assess the submissions that we get versus the rejection rate, and we try to figure out if we're not getting the right papers that fit the scope of the journal. And if we find out that we're getting more papers that are out of scope, then they do editorials to remind the audience what it is they're looking for. And that's been very successful, very successful. Not very successful.
If I may just add something else to the same discussion, but also responding to the point about quality and what are we actually talking about. So I think there's the aspect of quality that the board are first and foremost concerned about and driving, because of course they're concerned about the fact that the sentences should be legible and all of that, but the bit that really the content strategy bit that they're owning, that side of things, one of the things we've done with our journals is to have a program of proactive commissioning that's done not in a spammy mass email kind of way by any means, but in conversation with the Ed Board, looking at what the content strategy for the journal is and lending them some support with an internal staff member, helping them with the program of commissioning to kind of address that content strategy quality issue and the keeping up the article counts, because you need those articles. So that's one of the tools we've employed to speak to that piece, which I take the point as a separate thing to how is the copy editing being run, and I think that's a matter to be separately looked at, but one that perhaps conflicts less with the editors saying we need to publish less.
Anyone else? Yeah, right there.
I'm not entirely sure how related this is, but it's something that's come up at our journal, so I'm hoping somebody has an answer. Does anybody have a system for kind of running projections on, we have a couple journals that have a very large backlog, so authors are waiting a very long time to get published at our journals, even post-acceptance. And so what we're looking at is backlog. We're looking at higher submission numbers every year that are translating to more articles being accepted, not a higher acceptance rate, because our acceptance rate is about the same. But we're just kind of trying to figure out, based on all of those numbers, and if we did, say, 7 more articles a year, what the projections would look like. And I've been trying to find a way in Excel to kind of put all these numbers together, and I'm failing, but I'm like, this is publishing. People do these things all the time. Does anybody have a system for kind of keeping track of that information and running projections?
For projecting how many articles they need in order to meet, how many submissions they need in order to have like
Sorry, so I've got projections for kind of R&R rates for first round submissions and then eventual acceptance rates, but kind of throwing some other variables in there, variables on the number of articles we publish, for example. So if we publish more articles, when would the backlog clear to a point, and what would our accept rates need to be in the meantime to kind of bring those numbers down?
Yeah. So you're looking for a modeling. Yep, we got it right behind.
Just a really quick question. Do the journals publish like advanced access or early online? Like immediately
they
after
are.
acceptance?
Yeah, we're doing ahead of print now. So we do ahead of print. We do just accepted, which is supposed to be just accepted, but with such a long backlog, it's hard for me to get all those articles pushed through. But the idea is that yes, we would get things up online as soon as they're published, so it wouldn't be quite as big of a problem for authors.
Anyone dealing with that want to talk to it? I know we all have to deal with backlogs.
Right.
What do your production department look like? Because usually when I'm trying to figure out backlog projections,
I'm able to just consult with the production editors who are on those specific journals, and so I just want to know like more context in terms of what your conversations with them, because they should have a good handle on, you know, who when they're driving articles through post acceptance.
Right. So we've had those discussions. We've actually increased the page allotments for a couple of the journals. We're thinking at this point now that we may have to take one of our bi-monthly journals monthly in order to, but of course that's a big change, and I would like more information on if we do take it monthly, given the number of papers we have in the backlog. I know that we would be good for a couple years if we keep up with the current acceptance rate. But just kind of having specific numbers. I work with economists, so having specific numbers on when that backlog would shrink, when, and more importantly, because I've been in the famine situation too, where we don't have enough articles to publish, so I don't want to find myself in that position in a few years. So if I had some sort of modeling to just plug in different numbers and see what that would look like in a few years, that would be helpful.
I don't want you to get excited, I do not have a model. But I'm Karina, American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics in Reston, Virginia. One of our main issues with backlog involved special section articles. So I don't know if that applies to you at all, but with that, we're starting to do virtual issues. So basically before, an article that's due to be in a special section would be ready, and then the whole section, the whole group would be ready a year and a half later, which is crazy, right? So now we are assigning these special section articles to an issue as a regular article, and then when all articles in that special section are ready, we create a page, and it's kind of like a virtual issue. I don't know is anyone else doing virtual issues? It's kind of up and coming. Okay.
So
I don't know if that
your
applies.
virtual issue then, so you were a year and a half out for publication for a special issue. And so you've taken, as the articles are ready for that special issue,
we assign them to a regular issue, and we don't,
assign them to a
advertise it as
regular issue.
Right.
Okay.
Because before, sometimes they would wait.
Yeah.
They would just be on hold there for literally a year and a half, and I mean, I would feel terrible for
Right.
the authors.
And then it's published when everything's ready. Oh, that's
As a virtual issue.
As a
yeah.
virtual issue.
That's correct.
That's a really good idea. Let me write that down.
In fact, we do the same thing at ACS as well, and we actually have a tag on the articles that are part of the special issue but get published in a regular issue that this is part of the special issue, and that hyperlink gets active when you create the virtual page, so that there is discoverability from going from the virtual issue page to the article, right? But then also going from the article to the landing page eventually when the special issue goes up.
We do similar things at Sage with collections. So you'll have an article that'll be part of an issue. It can also be part of more than one collection based on those same special issues. Randy, I wanted to ask you about with rejected articles, if you have a referral scheme to pass them on to another journal.
Yeah, so we do. Along other AGU journals, we have a reject and refer, but we do that with consultations. So at first, papers were being transferred to other journals, and the other editor-in-chief would get it and say, well, this is garbage, it's not in scope here either, why do we have it? Which would frustrate the authors who thought they were going to be published in this other journal. So now nothing gets transferred until the editor-in-chief or editor talks to the editor of the other journal and shares at least the abstract to say, would you be interested in reviewing this for your journal? That way that happens behind the scenes, and if they agree to it, then the transfer happens with the author's agreement. We're not just transferring without the author's agreement for that.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to add to that. We do quite a similar thing. Get the mechanics right in your system and it can really, really work for you. But once that consultation bit is done, get it automated as much as possible, because once everybody's on board, it works beautifully if the system can work for you. Otherwise, you'll end up with problems, but it can work really well. And the author involvement I would call out as quite key as well. So what you don't want to happen is an author thinking they're ending up in one journal, and then they find that their work's being reviewed in another publication. So that's quite a pivotal bit as well.
So I guess the question was, who gets to decide what the destination journal is for consultation? Is that the editor or the author?
For AGU, it's usually the editor, but nothing happens without the author's agreement. And we've had to as well. Go from one journal to another journal with a consultation, and that journal doesn't want it, so they bring in another journal. So we've had them pass between 4 different journals before, different consultations, until we found that right home that the author agreed to and the editors agreed to as well.
But the author doesn't know that these consultations are occurring?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I think that's critical, because I've not had success with Cascade.
So we cascade either down from our flagship journal or amongst any of the sister journals, and we still have to implement like that behind-the-scenes conversation. But what we do is in our submission form, we ask the authors, like straight up, would you be okay with a cascade? And then it might happen, or if they outright refuse it, it's just a reject if it's out of scope. But we also ask our reviewers if it would be a better fit for a different journal, and we have some metrics to show like the appropriateness of the journal it was submitted to and also others. So even if no one recommends, the editor that's assigned to it can see. But we do, we're looking into how we're gonna have that behind the scenes consultation. But asking up front is quite useful, I find. And it's an opt-out of Cascade, to be clear.
So they're told at the submission which journals, alternate journals could be.
Yeah, so they can cascade to any of our sister journals or just opt out of that transfer altogether. So if we have the editor on board and they think it would fit better somewhere else, like we can offer the authors like basically it's out of scope for this journal, but if you'll agree to transfer it to 1 or 2, we're good to go. And they're quite receptive to that.
Can I ask a question? How often do you see the author playing the impact factor game and they come to the choices for transfers? Sorry.
Yeah, that happens. And I don't know, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for some authors it's important, like because our flagship journal, they submit to that because it has a really good impact factor. It's ranked #1 in medical informatics, so everybody wants to publish there. And if we suggest a transfer to a non-indexed or non-impact factor journal, I would say about half say no, I don't want to publish here. The other half said, yeah, okay, I don't need it at this stage of my career. So it really depends on where they are in their career. If they're PhD students and their advisor said, no way, you need to publish in an impact factor journal, then they just say no, thank you, right? So.
My name is Adam Palumbo. I'm a production coordinator for Environmental Health Perspectives, published by the NIH. Moving the conversation back to kind of the backlog problem, something I was thinking about just now that Patrick mentioned earlier is academia is behind publishing by maybe 15, 20 years, but something that I've seen in the past is moving journals online only, and what that does is your per page publishing costs go to a fraction of what they were if you're printing the journal. So you don't have to think about distribution. You are still paying for copy editing and XML or HTML creation, but that sort of thing allows you to expand your page extents for your issues. It allows you to think about other publishing models like continuous publication or something along those lines, so that your backlog can be sifted through much faster and published much faster, and still not increasing your costs. So that's a thought.
Going back to something Patrick said also, he and I are often at odds too with the metrics on, when reviewers when papers need to be turned around. And he stated, as I would, that he doesn't care about those. Everybody else has those metrics, right? Yeah. I'm not crazy for asking him to do those.
The thing that occurred to me, Patty, when he said that was ask your authors, because they will probably care about it quite a lot.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. It's not just us caring about those things. All right, are we ready to move to the next topic?